So, das geht jetzt gleich los. Ich mache mal hier die Tür zu. Nicht, dass ich da aus dem Bad irgendwelche Sachen so höre.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us today. A warm welcome to our webinar, Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific, Relevance and Geopolitical Implications, co-hosted by 9-Line and Next Generation Foundation, Taiwan. My name is Zsuzsa Ferenczy, and I have the honor to moderate our discussion. I am the head of Associates Network at 9-Line and non-resident fellow at NextGen Taiwan. Today's event is the first in a series of 3 webinars that we will be co-hosting together with the 2 organizations on Taiwan in the topic of Transparency, Trust, Taiwan. We will be touching on city diplomacy, on technology, on trust, all very important and relevant elements to Taiwan's and all the dynamics happening in the Indo-Pacific concerning Taiwan. And these webinars will be coming up in August and September, and more information will follow soon. So for those of you not yet familiar with us, 9-Line is a fast-growing, entirely independent platform offering an analysis on issues affecting the Indo-Pacific, seeking to connect Europe and the Indo-Pacific, stimulating nuanced dialogue through engagement with partners from all sectors. Taiwan NextGen Foundation is a think tank and education foundation working to make Taiwan a more sustainable, diverse, and inclusive place, focusing on issues related to Taiwan's soft power, the new Southbound policy, and the Bilingual Nation 2030 plan. Now, our aim today is to discuss Taiwan's role and relevance in the emerging dynamics in the Indo-Pacific and help shed light on the complexities, challenges, and the nuances often neglected in the public debate. With an increasingly assertive China, and challenges have intensified, hindering Taiwan's readiness to contribute to global developments as a genuine partner. But on the positive side of things, I would like to note, however, that at the same time, we are seeing an increase in like-minded democracies voicing their joint interest to ensure that Taiwan remains a secure, stable, healthy, resilient, and prosperous and innovative democracy. So to discuss these dynamics, we are grateful and pleased to welcome our speakers today. I will, in the following, briefly introduce our speakers to the audience, and then we can proceed to the discussion. So first of all, I would like to welcome you, Mr. Michael Gahler. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Gahler is member of the European Parliament since 1999. He's also member of the European People's Party, member of the European Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs, and also chair of the Taiwan EU Friendship Group. So we will be discussing that for sure. Then second, I would like to welcome Dr. Chih-Cheng, member of the Legislative Yuan, welcome, representing the 7th Electoral District, New Taipei City. As member of the Democratic Progressive Party, Dr. Luo serves as the chair of the Legislative Yuan USA Caucus, also Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee, the Judiciary and Organic Laws and Statutes Committee, and the Constitutional Amendment Committee. Then I would now like to turn to Justyna Szczudlik. Dr. Szczudlik, thank you for joining us. And Justyna, if I may, Justyna is the Deputy Head of Research and Head of Asia Pacific Program and China Analyst at the Polish Institute of International Affairs, a Warsaw-based think tank affiliated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland. Her research focuses on China's foreign policy, especially China's relations with Central Eastern Europe, as well as China-Poland in particular, and cross-strait relations. And then finally, last but not least, we have Ms. Ivy Kwek, Research Director for Research for Social Advancement. Thank you for joining us also. REFSA is a progressive not-for-profit think tank in Malaysia. Ivy is also visiting scholar at National Chengchi University of Taiwan and co-founder of Project Pretiwi, a blog dedicated to raising awareness on defense and security issues among Malaysian youth. So we have, as you can see, a fabulous panel here with a variety and a diversity of insights and experience and expertise. So I am sure we will have a very fruitful discussion. But before we proceed, I would like to make two announcements. After the speakers' contributions in the first half of the webinar, we will be taking questions from the audience. So I invite you to please send your questions either by using the hashtag TaiwanWeb21 or by dropping your questions in the live stream on Facebook or YouTube. And also the second announcement I would like to make is that in case, and I do hope that you feel inspired to join, to support us as 9-9, you find a link to our page on our Twitter. So this is the two announcements I wanted to make. And then without further ado, I would suggest that we start. And I would like to start in the order of the introductions that I just made. So Mr. Gahler, let me turn to you first. As member of the European Parliament, you have played a key role in warming relations between the EU, Taiwan. Recently, we've seen dynamics, very positive dynamics in the European Parliament to pay more attention to embrace and engage Taiwan. And certainly you have played an important role on that front. Also, in your own words, the EU-Taiwan Friendship Group aims to enhance cross-border support for Taiwan and to forge stronger ties between Taiwan, the EU, and like-minded European countries. Now, in your capacity and also keeping in mind the dynamics around Taiwan, also the geopolitical ambitions that the EU has in the Indo-Pacific, what is currently the mood in Brussels? Maybe you can take the next 3 minutes, if I can invite you, to say a few words on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Zsuzsa. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague from the Legislative Yuan. It's a great pleasure to have this joint seminar. And indeed, as you rightly said, there is a new dynamic and new attention given to the geography where Taiwan is situated. I mean, we have, as a response in a way to China's One Belt, One Road initiative already some years ago, started our connectivity strategy. But that was more or also focused on the countries between us and China in between. But now with this Indo-Pacific perspective, we are indeed, as European Union, attaching more attention to this area, and certainly, as you rightly said, to the increasing assertiveness of China. And as a European Parliament, we have we have traditionally good informal friendship groups with Taiwan in order to support this democratic society on the island and to encourage them to continue their prosperous path. Now, with regard to the latest activities, we have, for the first time, since I remember at least, I've been, as you rightly said, since '99 in the Parliament, now in the pipeline a report on Taiwan to assess how far we can deepen and broaden the relationship without, so to say, directly infringing on this, in principle, one China policy. I mean, we are not accepting the mainland's notion of one China principle. We say a one China policy that gives us and should give the European Union all flexibility to develop relations with Taiwan. And that is why we are suggesting this bilateral investment agreement, and we are exploring in this report an entire scope of relations that could be further deepened and strengthened. When I was in Taiwan, it's almost 2 years ago now, I created this acronym EBFDR, everything but formal diplomatic recognition, and that means in our daily lives we should be able to be as active as possible and as mutually beneficial, and that is what it's all about. It's of mutual benefit that we enlarge the scope of our relations, and so far I'm confident that we are not only as European Parliament but also as European Union watching closer to the region, and within the region, of course, also to Taiwan.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler. That was very clear and brief and to the point, and also very positive. I think the word you used there, that we are confident in terms of the EU and EU institutions, I think that's something to build on, and it's good to see. So now I would like to turn to Dr. Luo, if I may, and probably address a similar question to you, just to initiate the conversation. As I asked Mr. Gahler about the mood in Brussels, I would like to hear from you about the mood in Taipei, considering everything that is happening in Taiwan and in the region surrounding Taiwan, the tension. But as I said at the beginning, it's important to understand the tension, the challenges, but it is also important to see the positive developments. And here I am referring to all the voiced support that we've seen going towards Taiwan, not only solidarity, but really actual support. So we see that from European countries, from Japan, and we see that help also in Taiwan's efforts to contain or fight the pandemic after a very successful 1 year of containing it domestically. So would you mind taking the next 3 minutes to share the insights that you have in Taipei, please?
Thank you very much, Zsuzsa. And I think I want to start by thanking the Taiwan NextGen Foundation for putting together this panel. I think the theme of this topic, of this panel, is very important and very timely. Let me start by quoting what General MacArthur said almost 70 years ago. At that time, and obviously, we have seen a lot of changes ever since. Hold on, let me start with the computer. Okay, I think it's a paragraph from a memo on Formosa, meaning Taiwan now, written in 1950 on the eve of the Korean War. And General MacArthur said at that time, quote, as a result of its geographic location and base potential, utilization of Formosa by a military power hostile to the United States may either counterbalance or overshadow the strategic importance of the central and southern flank of the United States frontline position. Formosa in the hands of the communists can be compared to an unsinkable aircraft carrier and submarine tender, end quote. And I strongly believe that this insightful assessment of Taiwan's geostrategic importance still holds true today. As such, I think any discussion of the Indo-Pacific geopolitics would not be comprehensive without putting Taiwan's role in it. General MacArthur's concerns about that possible change of balance of power are now more real and urgent because today's China is very different from what it was 70 years ago. Simply put, China 70 years ago was not so strong, expansionistic, ambitious, and aggressive. Today, we are witnessing the rise of a more powerful, assertive, bullying, and aggressive China. So our underlying challenges is how to cope with or get along with this rising and more menacing China. So the key question for us is, what should be our grand Indo-Pacific strategy? Engagement, containment, rebalancing, hedging, or any other strategies? I'm not going to comment on whether these policies are successful or failed. feasible, or realistic. However, I do want to emphasize that we cannot come up with a sound and robust strategy without understanding what kind of China we are facing. To me, there are two major sources of China's behavior, namely communism and nationalism. The so-called China Dream, or the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, indicate China's pursuit of the status and power to define the regional order or even world order. So if this is a correct understanding of the nature of China's behavior, conflicts between China and the democratic world are not just a struggle for power, but also, more importantly, a competition for different ways of life. The rest of China will eventually challenge the universal values we enjoy and are proud of, including democracy, freedom, rule of law, human rights, free market, and so on and so forth. Recently, there are growing concerns about the visible shift of economic, political, and military balance of power in the region. Here, I must reiterate the strategic importance of Taiwan in this changing region. I always believed that the only way that the regional balance of power can be changed overnight is to have Taiwan fall into the hands of China. Taiwan stands at the forefront of the geostrategic, geopolitical, and geoeconomic competition between China and the democratic world. Obviously, for policymakers in other democracies, Taiwan should be seen as a strategic asset, not a strategic burden or even liability. Making good use of Taiwan's strategic role, we can reverse the gradual loss of balance in the Indo-Pacific. Let me remind us and everyone again of what General MacArthur said 70 years ago. His analysis was very provocative, but more importantly, very enlightening. And we are very happy to see that all the like-minded countries are working together to deal with the most important challenge we are facing, the rise of a menacing China. So let me stop here, and I look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Dr. Luo, for your remarks. You included so many interesting points and elements that I'm sure that we will be able to build on those. And in particular, I would highlight the fact that you said that basically no constructive conversation can take place without really understanding what kind of China we're really dealing with. So this is a very good point to turn to you, Justyna, because you have done extensive research on EU-China relations, on China itself, and you have recently argued that the EU is sharpening its policy on China. And you also argued that there is a change in perception of China inside the EU, also seen via better coordination among member states on how to address China. So I would like to ask you, in your view, do you see this shift, this conceptual shift taking place, affecting the EU's approach to Taiwan, and in what way? If you could elaborate on that for us.
Thank you, Zsuzsa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for an invitation. It's my great honor to be among these distinguished panelists and to talk about Taiwan. You asked me about the European EU's policy towards China that is hardening and sharpening in the last few years, and it is definitely true, and definitely it has an impact on our perception and EU's perception on Taiwan. And to be frank, when we look at, it's my understanding that right now, being in Europe, observing what is going on when it comes to China and Taiwan, there is a kind of positive Taiwan's hype here in Europe. But when it comes to the European Union as an institution, but also in the member states. And there is a kind of a process, I think, of the internationalization or multilateralization of Taiwan's issue here in Europe, not only in Europe. And the reason for that is, as you said, China. And to be frank, it's a little bit sad that we perceive Taiwan through the China lenses, to be honest, and because of China's factor, because China is becoming more aggressive, because of China's World War diplomacy, because of what is going on with the pandemic, COVID-19, disinformation, and it's disinformation activities of China is a new phenomenon in Europe. We are pretty accustomed and we know how it's going on disinformation from Russia, but for us, Chinese disinformation is something new. It's completely not new in Taiwan, especially since 9/1 elections 2018. So this is the China factor is very important when it comes to our interest in Taiwan. Unfortunately, to be frank, also because of value chain, semiconductors, and the importance of semiconductors and so on. But I think it's not only about China. It's a very positive dimension is that because of Taiwan's activities and Taiwan's policy, public diplomacy, and I'm not only talking about the COVID-19 and the fact that Taiwan's management of COVID was marvelous, but also before that, because of current government policy. What I mean, the fact that the objectives of the current government at the beginning of the second term of Tsai went to emphasize Taiwan's separateness from China, in a sense of systemic separateness, transparency of Taiwan's democracy, and also to focus on, let's say, that Taiwan is one of the most progressive Asian society. So this is also the reason why we are let's say, interested in Taiwan, and when we would like to focus on to pay more attention to Taiwan. And of course, it is now more important because of COVID, because of, let's say, the beginning of Trump administration and this war, let's say, technological and economic war with China, but also now after the COVID experience, that we should do something to be less dependent on Taiwan and on China. And Taiwan is it gives us a lesson, to be honest. New southbound policy is a good example, and I think this is a kind of a convergence with the EU's, let's say, strategic on Indo-Pacific, which is under the progress right now because we are still waiting for Commission strategy after the Council conclusions. And it's a good element to cooperate with Taiwan, how to try to be more independent from China when it comes to different topics, economic, people to people, cultural cooperation. So I think this is important. And one remark, if I may, because Mr. Gahler said about European Union and European Parliament, I would like also say a few words, just 2 sentences about the role of Central and Eastern European countries. Because I think that nowadays, when you look at what is going on here in Central and Eastern Europe, I'm from Central and Eastern European country, from Poland, you can see that we are to some extent, as a CE countries, in an avant-garde when it comes to improving or reinvigorate ties with Taiwan. And it is also the important issue that looking at the EU, we have the EU level, and to be honest, it could be difficult to do something very, let's say, something very new and some dramatic actions, because we need consensus when it comes to foreign policy. But there's, I think, more room for maneuvering for member states, and CE countries are good examples in the recent months that we could reinvigorate relations with Taiwan. Why? Because first of all, we are not dependent on China economically. Western part of Europe is dependent, and this is kind of a problem how to approach to Taiwan when it comes to having in mind this kind of let's say dependence on China. We as a country, we depend on US when it comes to security and our relations with Russia. It is a kind of a factor, I think. And of course, there is a growing disillusionment about China, and our cooperation with China, 17+1 is a good example. And just last sentence to stop. When you look at what is going on in Central Europe when it comes to Taiwan, we have at least 3 or even 4 examples: Lithuania, Czech Republic, Slovakia when it comes to vaccines, and Lithuania as well, but also Poland. Recently, we have some better relations with China, but since, let's say, 2016, we have agreement of avoidance of double taxation. We have Polish office in Taiwan, not Warsaw Trade Office that it was. We have direct flights since 2020 between Warsaw and Taipei. So we are in an avant-garde, and I would like to pay attention that it would be, I think, easier to have some concrete steps when it comes to member states, not when it comes to the EU. I think it would be difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Justyna. You really brought that nuance that I was referring to in my introductory remarks, the nuance that we need in the debate on EU-Taiwan relations. And also very important note to see that we need to look at Taiwan on its own merit and not only through the lens of China. As you pointed out, that's a crucial point. Disinformation, another crucial point, but without elaborating or building on those points, please keep your thoughts for the discussion. So I would like to turn to Ivy now, if I may. And we're again with you. We're going back to Taiwan since you're in Taipei. So you have done extensive research on regional security, again on perceptions, on the importance of perceptions and the question of trust among regional actors in the Asia-Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific, keeping in mind the rivalry between the US and China, and also Taiwan's efforts and interest to strengthen ties through the new southbound policy, as Justyna already referred to. Could you speak a little bit to that concerning how you see convergence, or do you see a convergence in views on engaging Taiwan more in the region among these member states, these countries, and also a little bit about your views and insight on the new southbound policy as such in this context? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsa, for your excellent questions, and thank you to NextGen Foundation as well as Line for having me here. So as the Southeast Asian on this panel, I was hoping that I can actually offer a little bit of the Southeast Asia perspective on the topic. And of course, being here also allow me to learn more from our fellow panels, because my research in Taipei is exactly to understand more on this topic. So let me just start by saying that Taiwan is no stranger to Southeast Asia. It has a very long-standing relations and extensive footprints in the region, thanks to the 2 times Go South policy in the past 3 decades. However, as we have alluded to earlier just now, Taiwan faces a very different region today, and it is no secret that a rising China is posing a tremendous challenge to Taiwan's engagement in this region. Southeast Asia dealing with Taiwan is increasingly being scrutinized by the watchful eyes of China, especially as cross-strait relations become increasingly tense. But as you can see, in the past 5 years of the new southbound policy, despite all these challenges, relations with Southeast Asia and Taiwan actually not only improved, but flourished. So just to demonstrate this point, some numbers. So overall trade volume between Taiwan and Southeast Asia from 2016 to 2020 has grew about 15%, whereas students that from Southeast Asia that study in Taiwan has also increased 85% since 2016. So we can see that despite the need to remain a close ties with China and the pressure to adhere to the One China policy, Southeast Asia has actually remained very flexible and very open in cooperating with Taiwan. So I would like to put forward 2 key takeaways here. So the first is that I think this reflects Southeast Asia's nimbleness and also ability to exercise their own agency when navigating great powers in the region. So far, in face of the intensified great power competition between US and China, Southeast Asia has been able to more or less maintain a very neutral posture and not succumb to the pressure to choose side. So in that sense, I think Southeast Asia really appreciate the fact that Taiwan's engagement in the region through the New South Wales policy, focusing a lot on pragmatic cooperations and also on the people-centric approach instead of sort of playing up a rhetorical sentiment. So the second point that I would like to put forward is that it shows that Taiwan presence is very much welcome in Southeast Asia. I think that Taiwan is very much looked up as a model example for in many areas, and these include COVID-19, the great COVID-19 management, as well as advancements in technology and innovations, and digital democracy, for just to name a few. The emphasis of the New South Wales policy, especially in my opinion, things like agriculture transformation, green energy, medical technology, and innovative industries are also areas that are very much aligned to the needs and the aspirations of Southeast Asia countries. However, we know that there will be challenges. The first would be geopolitical. As we have mentioned earlier, any overt support for Taiwan would put Southeast Asia in a precarious situation with vis-a-vis China. And perhaps it is also not surprising that we see that the progress with some of the New South Wales policy countries such as Vietnam or India has actually made more progress because these are countries that are adopting more willingness to be more assertive towards China or have the ability to do so. Second challenge is that we must also be mindful that Southeast Asia is not a homogeneous group. So different Southeast Asia countries have very different political system, economic performance, and also the level of existing tie with Taiwan. So in that sense, I think that New South Wales policy is right to have to adapt the different strategies for different countries, but it also makes it a little bit hard to evaluate the success of a New South Wales policy. So I think that just sort of trying to wrap up, I think that going forward, we need to really assert and emphasize the point that Taiwan has a stake in the peace and stability and the common future of Indo-Pacific, and therefore is a very important player in the region. I think that focusing on the pragmatic cooperation and people-centric is the right path to take. And going forward, I think that Taiwan, through the New South Wales policy, can actually think about deepening some of the cooperation in non-traditional security areas such as environmental challenges, health issues, food security, and maritime security. And then my last point would be that now, especially, I think this is a very important point for us today because we are in the presence of many different partners from Europe. And I think the last point is that Taiwan cannot be engaging the region alone. And Taiwan needs to seek more partnership with like-minded countries and have more discussion about how to integrate Taiwan into some of the initiatives such as the Blue Dot Network that's spearheaded by US, Japan, and Australia, partnership with quality infrastructures by Japan, and of course, some of the European Union initiatives such as the Horizon and the Build Back Better World partnership that was recently put forward by the G7 countries. So having these kind of multilateral corporations will give countries in Southeast Asia and the region more options of a better quality investment and better cooperation, and at the same time take the pressure off Southeast Asian countries from the sort of this dichotomy that we have said just now that is a little bit false, which is to sort of choose between Taiwan and China. So
Okay.
I'll stop here. Thank you so much, and I look forward to our discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. I think you gave a really thorough but quick but thorough assessment of the new southbound policy and also how you see what we should emphasize. And your last point was to seek more partnerships. And I believe our discussion today is all about reflecting on how we can identify more ways of cooperation and also how to integrate Taiwan in existing platforms. I think that pragmatic approach is very important, and it really is in the same spirit as what Justyna mentioned in terms of EU and member states and institutions cooperation. So this brings us to the end of your initial remarks. So what I would propose to you is that you take the time now to react to each other's points, because I'm sure a lot of points remain unsaid. So I would really trust you to do that. So whoever wants to go first is free to signal that to me, and then I can just take it from there in terms of moderating it. So who has something urgently wanting to say something? Mr. Gahler, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the input from the other speakers. I would just support what Justyna said, that of course member states can also add to the ties, and every bilateral engagement is welcome. We just had at the beginning of the week from Gabrielius Landsbergis this announcement in Lithuania that that Lithuania would open a trade mission in Taipei, in Taiwan. That is one thing only. I mean, on the other side, also, what could be bilaterally ended, and I would say ended, is this attempt this 17+1 initiative. I mean, if anybody, I mean, that's not only EU member states, there are also others. And I think Lithuania already stepped out, if I'm not mistaken, after the change of the government in Vilnius. I think if there is any, be it member state or other state in Europe or elsewhere, who thinks that he could profit from an initiative from China, getting them a better deal for whatever, I think they are foolishly mistaken. I think they will, especially in the area of trade and investment, be dragged over the table, as we say in German, by China that is, of course, strong, especially towards individual states. And I mean, we have this non-EU member example from Montenegro with the motorway that they financed, but which they cannot now pay the interest, and they are now bailed out by some institutions in order to reduce the dependence. So yes, everything that is done bilaterally additionally is welcome, not to be should be, but also should be ended. But I think if we are getting the entire European Union on board for an bilateral investment agreement, I mean, we are asking them to start with this scoping exercise as a run-up to that, and then to get the Council to give them to give the Commission a negotiation mandate. I mean, in a way, if the communists in Beijing, if they always speak of one country, two systems, which they are actively dismantling as we speak in Hong Kong, but still one could say, okay, if we have this CAI in the pipeline with mainland China, the other system, even if it is from the Chinese perspective, one country, then we have to deal also with the other side. So they could not even argue against us seeking to have a trade agreement with Taiwan. And that would definitely make a difference. When we look southbound, this initiatives southbound from Taiwan to Southeast Asia, I mean, we should, as Europeans, encourage ASEAN countries. ASEAN is always named, and it at first glance looks as if it was something similar to the EU. But if you look in detail, as it was said, they are very different systems. I mean, Vietnam feels also threatened by China, although it's a communist one-party state as well. And then we have vibrant economies, Indonesia, Malaysia, others, but they do not really make the best of it because they are not aiming at a free trade area in ASEAN, not to speak of a single market. But we should encourage them to strengthen them by joining forces and seeking more economic integration, which would strengthen them also with regard to mainland China. And if there were something like the EU single market in Southeast Asia, that would also be something more interesting for Taiwan, of course, not to have to deal with individual countries at their mercy or at their discretion, but to have another positive, friendly bloc with whom to deal with. So I think these are some initiatives that we should undertake. And to end, I mean, looking at Russia, we had a communication recently which was headlined "Pushback, Constrain and Engage." I think the same headline could apply to China. Push back, constrain and engage, knowing also that on the one hand we are economically interdependent, and it's not. I would perhaps insofar disagree a bit. I mean, all the mobile phones that are also used in Poland or any of our member states, the ingredients there, they come all from, or many of that comes from China, regardless where we are situated. So this interdependence is there, but I think we can, with China at the same time, criticize them, but also trade with them. They cannot boycott us. We cannot boycott them because we are so interdependent and interconnected, but that means we can afford to criticize them. But also with regard to Taiwan, make them very clear in case they would unilaterally and violently especially try to change the status quo, that they would pay an extremely heavy price. Realistically speaking, from the Europeans, rather from an economic point of view than from a military point of view. That is perhaps some job sharing with the US. But we should make that very clear from the outset, that the consequences of any unilateral violent step against Taiwan would be disastrous also for mainland China, and with unforeseeable consequences. But that is, so to say, that comes last. I mean, we are not starting with the most brutal consequences at the beginning. We should continue diplomatic efforts to convince them not to continue their assertive stance. That's where we are. Well, and that is what I wanted to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gahler. So we have Dr. Luo and Justyna, if we can, I guess, go in that order. And mindful of the time, if you could please still, I'm so sorry to be so obsessed with the time, but we only have 1 hour and so much to say. So Dr. Luo, if you could please react maybe to Mr. Gahler.
I think I agree that when it comes to bilateral relations and what we can do to improve these bilateral relations, we should be more creative, innovative, and try to come up with initiatives. But the thing is, again, I'm very happy to see the progress we together have been making over the years in terms of Taiwan, EU, Taiwan, Southeast Asian country relationship. But unfortunately, we also impose or self-impose some restraints or constraints on developing our, bilateral ties. Let me give you an example. Sometimes it's ridiculous. The president of our legislative union, he can visit Paris, he can visit London, but he's not allowed to visit Berlin for whatever reason. There are some guidelines written by a diplomat probably 2 decades ago in order not to antagonize China, in order to adhere to the so-called One China policy. So our president of the legislative union cannot visit Berlin. These are outdated guidelines. And these guidelines should be revised.
I agree. We should change that.
So we should go over the list and see what we can do. Start with the restraints that we impose on ourselves. And obviously, there are many things that we can do. Yes, we need to take into account the China factor. But in terms of bilateral relationship, we should not be conditioned by China. But on the other hand, one thing that we need to face now is that China is launching a very comprehensive, aggressive influence campaign, influence operation towards other democracies. You know, they have this kind of disinformation campaign. So these are the things that we should work together to deal with. You know, let me example. You know, China is not a democracy, but China has been very, smart in utilizing our democracy, of being transparent, free, and they influence our public opinions, influence our constituencies, and so on. Try to influence our politics, and these are things that we have to deal with. And Taiwan sitting next to a 800 kilogram gorilla, China. Taiwan is the victim of this kind of a situation. China is very aggressive in launching this kind of disinformation campaign inside Taiwan. And I think what happens in Taiwan could happen in other countries, in other democracies. So Taiwan is a very visible example of how a democracy is vulnerable to an authoritarian regime. So these are things that all like-minded countries can work together and come up with a comprehensive and effective strategy in dealing with the rising and authoritarian China. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luo. That's very important what you highlighted there on disinformation, because in the meantime, we're getting questions coming in. And one of the questions we have from London is on disinformation, exactly. Identifying it as an issue of common concern, and also an issue where the EU and Taiwan could be working together. So maybe, Justyna, as you react to previous comments, you can also touch upon on the issue of disinformation influence campaigns, if you could.
Thank you. So if I may, very short follow-up remark to what Mr. Gahler said, because of course it's wonderful that we as the EU European Parliament is trying to put Taiwan on radar and to reinvigorate relations. But what I would like to say that we should be, in my understanding, we should be modest about expectations when it comes to the EU on Taiwan because of the need to have a consensus when it comes to foreign policy. And it would be, I think, difficult to have a consensus on the, let's say, high common denominator when it comes to the member states, as member states have different interests and different also perception when it comes to China. So also some kind of issues with separatism and so on. They could not be very eager to accept this kind of very, let's say, pro-Taiwanese approach. This is my understanding. And of course, I know that the European Parliament prepared this report, and generally speaking, parliaments, not only European Parliament, also national parliaments, let's say, are more, there's a kind of difference of a perception. There's a more anti-Chinese, more pro-Taiwanese, but we should also look at the, let's say, governments, what Commission could do and what our governments could do. So this is my understanding, that maybe we should not expect something dramatic changes when it comes to Taiwan, unfortunately. So maybe as Mr. Law said, we should think about some more creative, maybe sectoral approach, maybe not think about just now about the bilateral investment agreement, maybe on some smaller kind of agreements. I don't know. So this kind of issues, because of course, one China principle, it's principle, not policy. I know it's not a God-given principle. To be honest, we could be more flexible about it. Try to define it in a different way. And one issue about the interdependence, as you said, about the German, that I said that Western Europe is to some extent dependent on China, about the interdependence, and you said about mobile phone. I do hope that because my laptop is Taiwanese, and I hope that I have inside the semiconductors that was produced in Taiwan. I do hope, and it's also important, let's say, interdependence, that we are to some extent dependent on Taiwan. And to be honest, China is dependent on Taiwan. It is paradox, to be honest, that now we are aware that China is dependent on Taiwan. So about this disinformation issue, I think that disinformation is absolutely crucial element when it comes to our cooperation with Taiwan, because we can learn from Taiwan what China is doing. Taiwan is a kind of a laboratory for China to use some new instruments how to influence democratic countries, democratic societies. And first of all, I think that is a very important element of our cooperation, because we are facing disinformation from Russia, and now we are facing disinformation from China. So we should cooperate on that issue to know what China is doing, what kind of channels China is using, what kind of PLA units are doing, preparing this disinformation, how it could affect our society, and how to fight it. And of course, Taiwan, because Taiwan is facing disinformation every day because of elections, COVID, and so on. So I think it's a crucial element for our cooperation. And we could do that because it's not like political element. It's like we should cooperate on that kind. So we should find more, let's say, sectors or areas that we could cooperate with Taiwan. Because of also our egoistic interest, to be frank.
Very important point, Justyna. Thank you for highlighting that. I think, Ivy, you raised your hand.
Yes, if I may just very quickly respond to what Mr. Gahler has said just now. I think that ASEAN is suffering a very similar issue with the EU, and ASEAN is actually even less institutionalized compared to the EU, and therefore, there's a lot of different interests and different level of different strategies employed by the member states. I think that Southeast Asia as a whole, they have been trying very hard to compartmentalize between the economic issues and security issues. So Southeast Asia, generalizing of course, but I think in general they look to China as sort of an economic partner, but maybe to the US more as a security balancer in the region. But I think going forward, obviously, we can argue if this is actually a sustainable model. How long can Southeast Asia do that, especially with geo-economic being sort of the battlefield at the moment. So I think that in that regard, actually, middle powers play a very important role, so that we are not just defined as a US versus China kind of the dynamics. And if you see, ASEAN has come up with the outlook on Indo-Pacific, and if you actually read it, you realize that ASEAN is trying to sort of redefine what Indo-Pacific is, and sort of have an alternative to the version that the US is giving, which I think a lot of ASEAN countries find it a little bit too political and too confrontational. And I believe that the European countries are also doing the same, sort of giving a different iteration of what is our vision for Indo-Pacific. So I think that is very important for middle powers to actually play this role, so that we live in a region that is actually sort of peaceful and stable, and also inclusive.
Thank you, Ivy. Now I do have a question that just came through. And anyone on the panel is free to take it. So I'll read it out to you. If the EU continues to help China grow its economy, does it not risk the US shifting its troops from NATO to the Indo-Pacific? So this is the question that came through. Anyone? We have other questions, so Mr. Gahler.
It has been a tendency, and we have to accept it as Europeans, that the US is focusing more on East Asia, on this on the Asian Pacific perspective. That is nothing that is either or. I think the US, and certainly this new administration, fortunately, is aware and willing to continue its obligations within NATO, and we Europeans are doing a good thing to keep the Americans happy insofar as we are fulfilling our obligations and not leaning back. Insofar, it is the US is not conditioning. I mean, the US is at least as dependent on the trade with China, and the Chinese have given so many credits to the US. There is so much American loans held by Chinese, so there is this interdependence in a way as well. But as I said, as we cannot, neither the EU and China, nor the US and China, trade-wise and economically, we cannot mutually boycott us, but we can use this interdependence to, not to ask, but to oblige China not to change unilaterally its stance when it comes to Taiwan, because they would then really, from the US and the EU, face tremendous consequences. And so far, this question, I would say at the end, no, because we are, EU and US are in a similar situation when it comes to China economically.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gahler. Anyone wants to add? Or maybe we give the opportunity, or okay, Dr. Luo, quickly, and then we have some more questions.
A very quick comment that is, don't forget that EU still has the arms embargo on China. And that's a very important position on the part of the EU. And we are very happy to see that the European countries have become more vocal or even forceful on human rights issues, Tibet, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, or even Taiwan Strait issues when it comes to the regional development. So we are very happy to see that now European countries are more forceful when vis-a-vis what European country was a couple of years ago.
Thank you for that. And now I think just in my capacity as moderator, I would like to ask actually something, because it seems like you both, Mr. Gahler and Dr. Szczudlik, you both spoke of the significance of EU level action vis-a-vis Taiwan as opposed to member states. And Justyna, you highlighted the fragmentation in the EU that is an obstacle, and you said that we shouldn't be we should be realistic, and I think you said be modest, you said, in a way. But for those of us who are not too familiar with the significance of an EP resolution on Taiwan, Mr. Gahler, I think this is important to our audience to understand what the significance, in your view, is to have such a report for the future of EU-Taiwan relations on a European level. I think this is important. It would be interesting for the audience to know, to understand.
Well, it has, of course, no, as it is a political report, resolution, it has no immediate effect, but it triggers or strengthens certain discussions. That is the purpose, to push, the Commission in a way has to react in one way or the other, but it also is supportive to all those discussions that are ongoing in the member states, and be it first in the parliaments and in the governments, and so to say, to have a list of arguments that is the trigger factor that such a report should have. It will be carefully read in Beijing, of course, as well. That's fine. It's a public report, but for us, it's definitely should serve as a list of arguments in the member states. As I said, the point is the Commission on her own, she can make this scoping exercise to what that is a run-up to a possible trade agreement, and then it's the Council that has to agree unanimously to give the Commission a certain negotiation mandate. And as we have seen unity when it was about the sanctioning of these officials in Xinjiang. And by the way, it was not only the EU, it was the UK, it was Canada and the US that simultaneously acted in this regard. I think that is also something that is very important to see. Well, hopefully at some point a community of democracies acting together against this challenge, if not to say threat, that comes from China. And coming back to our report, it encompasses the whole range of possibilities, and then let's pick one after the other and realize it.
Okay, thank you. I think that was very helpful and important. Now, I look at the time and we have 2 minutes left, and I have one more question. And then I would like to end with giving each one of you 30 seconds to tell us the main message that you take away, or the main message you want to leave us with. So I would like to do all of these things. So let me just quickly read out the question, and whoever takes it really has to stick to the time. So the question would be, what role do you see of ASEAN and EU platforms to create a common understanding about China's economic diplomacy? This is coming in from Chih-Cheng, a question, if anyone wants to say a few words on that. ASEAN and EU to create a common understanding about China's economic diplomacy. Okay, I see.
I mean, we cannot simply drop the question, but I wanted to, as I have
exactly
so much time, I didn't want to be the first. I think, as I said, with regard EU, ASEAN, we should encourage them not only to call them ASEAN, but to really be stronger towards China, because China can pick them one after the other if they so wish, unless they are really united. And that means to have common set of rules in the trade area, to really amongst themselves have common rules. So if China tries to pick one, they would have to pick all. And if one refuses, the others together, they can refuse any unfriendly activities. But if they remain only as a title ASEAN, but have nothing really in common economically and a set of rules or agreements, then it's easy for China. So that could be our appeal. Join forces.
Thank you, Mr. Gahler, for taking the question. So I am sad to say that we are at the end of our conversation and our wonderful exchange here, but we still have, and if you can stay for an additional 2 minutes with us, to take really 30 seconds to just leave us with one message that you wish to be recorded as your main message at this conversation. So maybe we go in the reverse order as we started the conversation. So Ivy dear, could you please take a second?
I will also very briefly respond to the ASEAN questions. I think that ASEAN has they realize that they need to stay united in face of a giant neighbor. Whether or not they will actually call it out by name is another matter. But I think that understanding of needing to be united and needing to diversify their dependence from any countries, I think that is there. So my takeaway would be coming back to Taiwan in Indo-Pacific. I think that Taiwan has a role to play, and Taiwan has been playing a very positive role through the new southbound policy, despite all the challenges. I think that having Taiwan in the picture will give Southeast Asia countries more options, and I think that that effort can be boosted if we work together with all like-minded countries.
Thank you so much. Immediately, Justyna.
Well, one sentence about ASEAN EU. I think that because we have the same position, because we as ASEAN countries and EU, we do not want to take sides and to say that we choose China or we choose United States. So to be frank, recently it's my thought that maybe we should not talk all the time, but we should do something against China. We have built blocks against China. We should do something. We should cooperate to let's say against China, but without saying that, not to make any provocation towards China, not to make them respond something like that. So I think it's a good way, and we're looking at the elements of the EU Indo-Pacific strategy is a good way. We as the document does not mention China, to be frank. And the last sentence, at the end of the last sentence from my side, I think that we should really, as the EU and EU member states, we should handle with care when it comes to Taiwan. Ask Taiwan what Taiwan is expecting from us, not to put Taiwan in an awkward position, to be honest. Put Taiwan on radar and to assure that Taiwan is not alone. I think that when China knows that Taiwan has friends, but not like, you know, to show that we are aggressive, doing something against China. Maybe China does not want to use these coercive measures to the larger extent. It's my hope. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Justyna. That's a great remark. Dr. Luo.
I would like to echo what my colleague, Mr. Gahler said. That is, China's policy or foreign policy is very clear and consistent. That is united front strategy. Divide and defeat, divide and conquer. So for us, easy, united we stand, divided we fall. Let me stop here.
Thank you. Mr. Gahler?
Well, once again, let us trigger all options of increasing relations with Taiwan from the EU side, and encourage partners in Southeast Asia to do likewise. And in a united approach, we can develop and increase and deepen the scope of relationship and of relations, and make it very clear that Taiwan matters.
Well, that is an excellent point to finish the exchange on, that Taiwan matters, and Taiwan matters a lot to all of us. Thank you so much for your availability and for your insights, and really for such a wonderful exchange of views here. I myself have also learned a lot from listening to you, and it was really my honor to have you on the panel. Apologies, we went a bit over time, but I think it's just an indication that as much as I tried to avoid obsessing over time, but it's an indication that there's so much to discuss. So that is another reason why we will have a second and the third webinar coming up in the next months. We will share more information on that. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you to the organizations involved in this, to 9-Line, as well as NextGen Taiwan. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, hopefully you feel even more inspired to support us at 9-Line. You will find the link on our Twitter page. Thank you for the team making this happen behind the scenes. My gratitude to all of you, and I wish you have a great day and a great week and a great summer, and we stay in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank
you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you.